Yo, 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 yo. How you doing, mate?
I'm frustrated about things in the game, but
You just
healthy.
lost a ladder game,
Healthy.
didn't
Well,
you?
another one. Okay.
So you just lost a ladder game, it sounds like?
No, I won my last game today, but I I was on my C game today. Generally,
Having to
I was
deal with our own lack of performance. Always a fun one. The classic,
yeah.
I, for whatever reason, am playing at 80% of my normal skill level. Always fun to try and do that, you know? It's where you've got to, you're like, okay, normally I'd focus on this. Instead, I'm going to focus on, let's remember my 36 overlord. You know, you're like, you're putting your focus into the most mundane things. Hey, so before we go into replay,
Yeah, I don't forget my 36 overlord. I forget my 52 overlord.
Yep, the 52 overlord. There we go. You know, that's it. There's always one. Before we go into game, so we know we're going to talk about Vipers today because you talked about SkyToss and you talked about Mech, and also we just want to learn Spellcasters as kind of the next evolution. How about we go custom game arcade and we play the LOTV unit tester for about just 10 minutes or so here at the start. And then we can go back and look at the games, because when we look at those games, part of that is going to be how can we, you know, finish the game better, continue to work on our attacks and stuff. We can talk about, okay, well, the Vipers would come in well at this point and stuff. But let's first of all talk about practicing the Vipers. So if you just go custom arcade, I made you the party leader.
Can I make you the?
Yeah,
I'll
you
make you
can.
the
You
leader.
can. Do you know how to find it though, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So for anyone who's watching, I guess, custom arcade LOTV unit tester, map made by Brandon.
Do you have the stream delay today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
You
picked the day. EPT is literally every week, so yeah. That's cool. We can kind of see what you're doing and stuff. I forget, we can always try screen share as well if something ends up being really confusing. So, yeah, basically we want to just learn Abduct, because Blinding Cloud is good, but more situational. Abduct is almost any situation, Abduct is good, right? It is so reliable, and it's something you can always just use to recycle over and over again, right? Grab the Colossus, kill them. Grab the, 6 siege tanks with your 3 Vipers, kill them. Pull back, go somewhere else, This sort of stuff is really, really great. So we're going to go field, make it a little bigger. So I'm red, you're blue. Okay, so I guess options, let's make sure energy is on. Set to full, it is. Cool. So, I mean, you can grab yourself, you should be able to, if you choose like Roach Speed, Hydra upgrades, and a couple of Vipers, and some Roach Hydra Viper. And I will just...
Hydras. 10 Roaches, 20 Hydras.
Oh, you have
4 Vipers.
You're very quiet now. I'll turn you back up. Sorry, I turned you down because you were really loud.
Oh dear.
Before. Sorry, can you just speak normal?
Yeah. Hello.
Okay, yeah, you're super loud again. You're super loud again. Let me turn you back down. Okay. As long as we keep the same distance to the mic or whatever, that should be right.
Yeah, I have a headset mic. So.
Yeah. Yep. Just if you
are we good?
Keep it there. It should be right. Test for me. Test.
Testing.
There we go. That's good. Nice. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I guess we can. I mean, are you on 0-0? Yeah. Give yourself like +2 attack. Just to make it a little more realistic, I guess. And yeah, I don't know. Let's just give myself some Thors. Cool. So get your control groups the way they would normally be, and yeah, basically show us how you'd try to use Abduct.
I'm wasting away here. Let's go. I hear you. I am
virtually no practice with this.
Yeah, cool.
That's what happens.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is great because we can just hit reset. Now, just remember you do need to do a control group each time you reset.
Yeah.
If you ever want to save, I believe the control groups will be saved if you go control group and then you actually save the game. This game has a bunch of save and load slots, which is awesome. So you can set up different micro scenarios in here and just keep going back in and, you know, using the same ones. Every time you load the map, it'll have the same save. So you can actually kind of create your own little micro battles in here to just get a few reps with, which is really useful. Just even if I'm not being controlled, you can actually just click the attack button and that will tell all units on the map to attack to the midpoint, and then you can control your units, right? So you can kind of use this even with no opponent and you could still practice the order in that. So what's always important, prioritizing, getting the exact order of operations down, knowing exactly what we're doing, starting out slow and then, you know, steadily increasing speed. So let's tab out to the document. The guys on stream aren't going to be able to see this, but that's okay. So we're going to actually start with some Viper practice. So let me put a little heading there. So in terms of Viper, Roach, Hydra, Micro, how about you just write out a little order of operations / priorities, something like that. Just kind of give us a little list there of what you think should be kind of the focus. So basically, just down here.
Can't I tell you?
Sure. Yeah, if you want, you can say it out and I can type it. Sorry, I forgot. It's a bit harder for you to have the document open at the same time, isn't it?
I have another computer, just it's slightly awkward to.
Yeah, no, that's a bit awkward. No worries. Yeah, just do it verbally.
Well, I'm supposed with the army which deals the damage, I'm supposed to stay out of range of whatever it is they have set up defensively, and so that army should get in position and then not move.
So what do we mean by get in position?
Well, just as close as possible while out of range. So like here maybe, if it
Awesome.
stalls. Okay. Then the Vipers should be in that army somewhere.
So Viper's just above the army, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then abduct. And then move the army back if this happens.
Abduct, move back, slash.
Abduct, then
Move-
shift
yeah.
then shift the Vipers back.
So move back, A move back, A move. Army can be like a thing sometimes, right? Where it's like sometimes you're like, oh, went a bit too far forward, pull back, but then you've abducted some units, so you want to turn them to fight. So you A move, kill the units, move back, abduct some more units, A move. There can be a sort of little rhythm there. Cool. Yeah, I mean, that was basically it. So the main thing here is... yep.
Shifting the Vipers back, that's specifically against Thors, because the abduct range is the same as the Thor anti-air range, isn't it?
Yeah, let's actually not focus on shift. So there's a few different techniques for the Vipers as well. Vipers themselves. You know, Viper abducting. So let's try and use non-shift. And I've done coaching sessions in the past, so let me see if I can find a video. Pigstarcraft, SE2, coaching, Viper, Micro. Let's see if I can find something. I think there must be one. No, I'd like a pig video, not a neuro video, please. It's just a lot of loco videos. I'm not sure. Where'd it go? Maybe it's... I can't remember. Maybe it doesn't have Vipers in the title. Maybe we focused on a bunch of different spellcasters. Anyways, let's try non-shift method. So non-shift method equals Vipers stacked on top of each other, right? So kind of like, you know how you clump Mutalisks or any air units, right? Where you're kind of clicking right at their feet as you move them forward, so that they clump up, so that they're not all spread out when they come in. And then we're going to try to like basically abduct with all of them at almost the same time and then immediately click them back. And this is going to be technically better because it's going to be a little bit smoother if, number one, we lose vision. It's very hard to use shift if you don't have vision until you get in abduct range, which happens sometimes, right? If you don't have like changelings or creep or something, it's always harder to use Vipers. So this is the one where like you can always use this technique, whereas shift is something it can be nice, but we often need to have vision ahead of time to really plan for it. So Viper stacked on top of each other, you know, try to get them all just in range, spam a round of abducts, click them back to safety behind your army. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. All right. Not bad, but let's try to actually move the Vipers all into range. So the way you would want to do this, and actually let me show you quickly. I actually can control your units as well. That won't change anything. It just means I get to show stuff. Okay. So this is going to be very laggy, of course, for me. I got 300 ping, but just like that. So notice I kind of moved them just a little bit closer. So when I started casting it, they could all just cast it, whereas yours stopped just a little bit further out. Not a big difference. Just make sure they go just that little bit closer.
Feel the thunder. Now, I am here. Click me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Better?
Yeah, that was good. Let's do it again. So one thing, normally I would... You're timing it out really nicely, but notice only some of your Roach Hydra started fighting. So what I like to do almost every situation with Vipers is pretty much the same formation you had, but just before your Vipers get close enough to abduct, I'll just add an A move in on my ground army, so that as I start abducting, all the units are like actively engaging. But the important thing there is, from the moment my Vipers are entering danger territory, I've already given the A move on my ground army, so I don't really need to worry about them at all. It's all still Viper focus, which is the whole point, right? We want all our focus to be on the fancy, fragile Viper. But the idea is the units are A moves, so they're automatically engaging, and then it's just when we disengage, oh, maybe our Roach Hydra goes a bit too close, so maybe we want to disengage with the Roach Hydra, but there's no active micro like, oh shit, I've abducted, but my units aren't fighting, right? Which is kind of what happened in that previous engage. Lots of words, essentially, basically just saying, just give an attack move to the ground army, just a little bit before going with the Vipers. So same formation, Roach Hydra is a bit further back to make up for the fact that you are going to attack move it in, and see how it goes.
A move the army before abducting.
Yeah. So as long as you keep your Roach Hydra back a little bit, it's just making sure the units will automatically kill those units that get abducted. Otherwise, you might accidentally say abduct like siege tanks or Thors, and then they just like walk away, or Immortals or Archons walk away, because your units actually aren't close enough to kill them. And then you need to use a second abduct on them, which is a pain in the ass. Or you abduct 5 siege tanks, and you've only got a few Hydras actually attacking, and the rest of your units are just sitting a bit further back. That's what happened in that last fight. Only 7 of your Hydras attacked the Thors, and the rest of your army was just sitting there.
But if the abducts aren't timed right, then the rest of the army will walk into 10 siege tanks.
Yeah. So this practices you making sure your Vipers are just in front of your army, the right distance. So you might want to have your Roach Hydra a little bit further back to start to make this a bit easier. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, not bad. Let's try that again, but remember to try to use your... So keep the Roach Hydra a little bit further back, even. Give yourself a bit more space. And so you could, yeah, you could start from like about there. Like your Roach Hydra is really close, so you could be further back.
Really?
Yep. And
Here's
with your
mine.
Vipers, I want you to try to make sure you move them all to just inside the Thor range and then throw the abducts. Remember what I said about try to clump them... Oh, sorry. My bad. Accidentally clicked your Vipers. Try to, you know, clump them up a bit and go in there and just... So you, because what's happening is you're starting to throw abducts and 2 of your Vipers are sitting way back out of abduct range. So I'd like you to try to land 4 abducts here almost simultaneously, like very close to each other.
Hit me.
No, not that one. Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah. Vipers in front of the army. Then army A moves.
That was really good. That was really good. I mean, it obviously just takes more practice to feel more fluid with it, but that was awesome. That was very nice. So it's just going to take a bit more practice for it to be all memorized, but that was pretty nice order. The Viper's just in front, Roach Hydra A moves, and then trying to move those Vipers in, spam abducts all at once. So yeah, just try to remember to cast, to move kind of into the Thor range with the Vipers, drop the abducts, etc, etc. So if you want, you can even have your Roach Hydra a little bit further back than this, just to give yourself a bit more space and room. And it can be like A move ground army, move Vipers in, drop abducts, pull back Vipers.
Okay.
Beautiful. Let's do that again. That was great.
So 1, army gets in position. 2, Vipers in front. 3, army A moves. Vipers move. Duct. Vipers go back.
Absolutely effing beautiful.
Our allies are being attacked.
Do that one more time. Very nice.
Okay. I can practice this on my own as well.
Yeah, just do one more for now, just to get the muscle memory and the order down now, but then we'll talk about kind of shift.
Okay.
So let's go back. So what I'm going to do here now is I am going to make things a little bit more troublesome. Same scenario, same micro. Because we've got some tankies. And
This
they're
army
quite clumped. And remember, we're not allowed to use blinding clouds even when enemies clumped up. Until you're really good at your abducts, we're going to just focus on abducts, okay? So the punishment here, of course, is because the tanks are so much longer range. Anytime you overextend even a little bit, your Roach Hydra kind of gets hammered by the tank fire a bit. So it just kind of rewards you being a little bit more finessed. So whenever you're ready, just keep going again. And whenever tanks are available as targets, always go for the tanks because they're so fragile, easy to kill once you pull them forward. So obviously, that scenario, well, most of the tanks are kind of behind the Thors, kind of hard, but... whereas when you abduct a Thor, they're so beefy, they actually take so long to kill still. But you'll notice here that you really want to, you know, try and utilize the edge of that abduct range and then pull back. Yeah. So that last Thor was over-aggressive. The other ones were great. It was like kill the units, pull back, and you actually take minimal tank shots, right? It was really nice. What you'll often see, and even for me as well, same situation, is you can start a fight amazingly with abduct, and you can stay 10 seconds too long being like, yeah, let's stay here. And that's usually where this shit happens. Then you take a really awful engage. So whenever you're ready, go one more time with the same micro, and then we'll start talking shift method. But yeah, this is good because
I am using shift.
Oh, you are using shift? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I can
If that feels good for you, then go for it.
Got to move the Vipers. Yeah, I've never been, when trying to use Vipers, never moving the Vipers before.
That's how you should use every spellcaster, is move them into range, then cast the spell. This is why we see people drop Fungals or Psystorms and they like completely miss armies. They're casting them when their spellcast is a screen or half a screen back behind the army. They're like, spell. And basically what that is, it's a disconnect between us trying to use an ability and actually knowing where the spellcaster is, right? It should be something we only use when the spellcaster is in range for the most part, so that it's an immediate, I use the spell and I know what I'm using it on. Otherwise, if it's travel time, and a fight can drastically change in a few seconds, right? So if you throw abducts from back here and this army repositions or something, you know, your Vipers can get all confused and derped out, or they can be abducting the wrong units, the ones that aren't at the front, and you're taking a whole bunch of unnecessary fire. So same thing with Infestors, Vipers, High Templar. We kind of always want to have those on a separate control group and be microing them up kind of just behind or on top of our front line. obviously not way out in front of our army for like infestors and stuff. We get to do that with Vipers since they're an air unit, which is kind of nice. But yeah, it's this kind of nice thing where just trying to make sure we move them into range, it gives us a much more, it makes sure we monitor their position, right? So we know exactly where they are, we know like what they can hit and when they can hit it. So it kind of puts us in better contact with where our spellcasters actually are at any given moment and gets us really active at putting them in the right positions in a fight. Get out. Yep, good. Very nice, very nice. So yeah, it's also something where obviously when Viper energy is gone, things can go a bit messy. Go again for one more wave here. But yeah, often it's like even if you've got energy left over, it's one round of abducts, pull back, and then it's better to initiate again from the start. And you know, like I've said here, no blinding clouds allowed until you get really sick at abducts. It's just a way of simplifying the equation so that we're getting better at identifying exactly how to use abducts and how to keep our Vipers alive.
Our allies are being attacked.
Keep our Vipers alive after every fight. Consume and queue them back to the front. Now, something with consume with Vipers, by the way, you can always double queue a consume. So a single consume on its own gives, I have no idea how much energy, but it takes 2 consumes to get a Viper to full energy if it's on 50 or less, right? So basically you always want to double queue up a consume off an Evo chamber. So I guess, what color are you? Blue? We can practice it here. Obviously you don't want to be sucking too much life off hatcheries. But the way you can do it is you can actually queue to do it and then do it again. Now the problem is there is a cooldown, right? So you have to kind of wait a second, I think, before queuing the second consume. Because I think there's a 1 second cooldown on it. But as long as you make sure you do queue it onto a different structure or whatever, it should be fine.
So you can queue onto 2 different structures, but not onto the same structure.
But not onto what, sorry?
Not on the same structure. I just pressed consume, shift, then double clicked 100, double clicked the other 100.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to spread out the hit points you're stealing normally, because normally your first however many consumes are going to be lair or hive, evo chamber, spawning pool, bane nest. Like, you just want to spread it across everything so that you're not putting any one structure in huge issues. But yeah, just practice those double consumes now, because this has got to be a habit. And it's also something where, oh, my opponent's pushing. You can't panic and just bring control group 2 over there, because empty Vipers are useless, right? You got to be patient, and if you're dealing with a lot of stuff, you got to buy time and do delaying tactics while you wait for the Vipers to refill, and make sure you don't interrupt these double consumes, and let them get back to full energy before using them again. So that's just a kind of fundamental habit that needs to be there with Viper usage. It's almost like spreading creep or something, or injecting. It's like, hey, every fight, go queue up the doubles, rinse and repeat. Now, when you are abducting, can you so you can use the drone on the far right rather than those. Though
I know.
Those will still build instantly, right? Okay, they will. Good. Are you toggling for the abduct? So basically, with the way you can abduct, right? Are you going D-click, 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 like this? Or are you, sorry, I'll let you control it. Or are you holding D down and then going left click, left click, left click?
Toggle.
So you are holding down D and just going left click, left click, left click?
No, abduct, click, abduct, click, abduct, click.
You're going D-click, D-click, D-click. Cool.
Yeah.
I tend to do that. Some people prefer to use the toggle when they're doing a lot of abducts. So let's just try it and just see what you prefer, I guess, just so we know it's an option. So basically, you can just hold down D and click, 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 click. And that way...
I did not know you could do that.
Yeah. By default, every single spell in StarCraft, every ability, you can do this with. Most pro gamers don't know you can do this. Every time we do micro stuff like this, I always talk about it. People are like, oh, you mean rapid fire? I'm like, this is not rapid fire. This is built into the game since day one of StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty. Nobody uses it. Some people do actually, but not very many. So it's just once you hold down a key after like maybe a quarter of a second or something, I don't know how long it is, it will toggle and it'll say, oh yeah. And then you can just spam left click. So you can like abduct your whole army here. But if you try to immediately start left clicking before having held the button down for long enough, it's not going to work. So try to do it too quickly. So try to fuck it up. Basically hold down D but immediately start left clicking. You can do it on your own units if you want. So the problem is you were holding down D well before you started abducting. So you need to do this when you're above the actual units to actually see it break. That seemed to work.
Oh,
there we
I had
go.
to cancel.
Oh, no, you're out of energy. Anyway, reset. Sorry, try again.
Uh,
Just hotkey the Vipers. You've got plenty of energy. Give it a go.
try to mess it up.
Yeah. You're holding the key down, right?
Yeah.
Seems to be working. Cool. Give me a go. Let me see. Have you gone into the registry to adjust your keyboard settings?
Yes.
That's probably why. Though, to be honest, I've done the same thing. And okay, so the first one I managed to screw
Oh,
up.
is the delay just because the Windows default what's it called? The delay before it starts repeating the key is quite long.
Yeah.
Not in the game. That might be it.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I managed to break it once there. And then I managed to do it again. It toggles so quickly. Holy shit. I think this is actually because we've gone into our registry. I haven't tried to use this toggle in a long time. So if you've gone into the registry and reduced the repeat rate and everything down to like 200 milliseconds or 0 milliseconds or whatever, right?
Down to as quick as I can while still being able to type.
Yeah, cool. So that actually means this is even easier to use. Like it used to, I'm like doing this. I'm like, oh shit, I guess I haven't done this since changing those settings last year. I managed to do it then, but yeah, that's crazy. It toggles really quick, so that's actually really easy to use. So if you like that, you can use it. I guess in terms of, so what you were doing, by the way, with your micro. So I'm just gonna have a little go here because there are things that I don't consciously do, right? Yeah, so the reason I don't like queuing is, notice like, because I only cast like 5 abducts there, all the Vipers that didn't abduct. And I do queue back sometimes, but sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Is obviously the other ones kept running forward before they ran back. But
I see.
as long as you abduct once with every Viper, I think it's fine. So as long as you abduct once with every Viper, they're going to complete the abduct and then get the Q run away command. Otherwise, they're going to run right up to that point.
I would never move command the Vipers into the army. It would always be what I think is slightly in range.
Yeah. I mean, it should be just a...
forwards too far.
Sometimes it'll be just a little bit more. Obviously, like, not right on top of the army, but I mean, just, like, a little bit closer. Because you do want to go just a little bit closer to make sure you're there. But yeah, I mean, I think you look pretty good with this micro. I'm just kind of thinking about, is there anything else I do here? Oh, Overseers is something I wanted to mention here. So you want to, obviously... versus Protoss, Overseer feedback shield is a thing. So 5 Overseers
I was about to ask that.
with the key. Yeah, it's something I always forget to use. Like, I never use it almost, but that's because I'm more about finding the correct angle where they don't ever get a chance to feedback me. 5 Overseers with the control group. So when they all stack up, and that's what we were talking about, where like you stack those Vipers on top of each other, you do that with the Overseers with them, and it's really hard for your opponent to feedback the Vipers, right? So when they all stack up, it's hard to feedback. And that could even be 10 Overseers, right? If you've got enough money in the super late game. So that's versus SkyToss, of course, super late game scenario. But I think what's almost more important, find the correct angle. So I think people, they go, oh, cool, I got Vipers. So like recently, actually, I've had some really fun games versus, what's his name? He's just named like Tim or something, Timothy or something. I can't even remember. This Terran player, and he's just been trying to overpower my Viper, Roach Hydra Lurker, with just like so many tanks, and he's been setting up these like giant tank concaves, like just in defensive positions. And there's this funny thing where if you don't have full vision, and he's really good at denying vision, and you run into the center of this concave to abduct of tanks, well, you're going to take a friggin' beating, right? From the tank fire, no matter how good you are. So if you look at this position I'm in, attacking down the center is really bad, right? So you would want to attack on one of these wingtips of my army. And that's generally what you want to do, is you want to come down on one of the edges. You always want to hit the flank. It's the same thing where sometimes the Terran will have a few Vikings, which are really good for just killing some of those Vipers. Vikings pretty expendable, Vipers very expensive. So imagine if these two Thors out here, imagine if these were Vikings as well. It's like, well, you always want to attack where they aren't. Same thing if there's a ghost ready to EMP or something, depending on how advanced your opponent is. So it's just kind of cool to work your way around the flanks. And whenever your opponent repositions on a certain angle, you always want to try to come in from a different angle. Rotate your army around out of vision and always try to catch them unawares. Whether they're Protoss or Terran, this is the same thing. Where if they know you're over here, this Thor, imagine this is a High Templar. Well, that High Templar easily comes out front, feedbacks 4 Vipers, and you go, oh, goddamn, attack ruined. But you come in from an angle he's not expecting. Completely different story, right? That's why the vision battle with you spamming changelings is very important, right? Spamming changelings, spreading creep, but also doing things like abducting oracles, dodging revelations, right? That sort of stuff can be really important. So sometimes I'll let my army get kind of revelated, but my Vipers, I always am very obsessed with not letting the Vipers get revelated so that they can come in from a surprising angle, abduct a bunch of stuff, and then, you know, snap it all down. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you can just practice coming in and picking off a few units from this tip of the army, pull back, rotate around to the top side, and do the same thing over there.
Got to move the army.
Yeah. Oh. And now rotate around all the way back to the right and then around to the top. So the idea is, what's your opponent going to do? Oh, let's bring me anti-air down here. Let's reposition some stuff on this side. And if they don't have unlimited scans, sensor towers and whatnot, bam, you come in from the other side. And what are you doing? You're just engaging a few units at a time. You're taking the good engagements. You're picking off those units. So that's kind of one of the really nice things with Vipers, right? It's finding the correct angle, because I mean, I've had these in low impact payload, but when they're in high impact payload, where you got a few Vipers out front or whatever, it's like losing those Vipers really sucks, right? I guess, like, what's another thing? I'm just adding random notes up the top, by the way. 5th base gas is very important, right? If you get enough gas up, you can actually afford to replace the Vipers and stuff. But generally the goal is use Viper energy, get a crazy efficient trade, go back, get more Viper energy, go back, get another crazy efficient trade, rinse and repeat. And you kind of just don't really lose units, or very few units in each trade if you do it correctly. And you just wipe out whole armies for free. I thought I was all over this Zerg the other day. And then he came out with 7 Vipers and abducted 14 of my Cyclones with my battle deck. And it was just every Cyclone in my army. And I was like, oh. And then he just got more energy and came and grabbed all my tanks. And I was like, yeah, okay, GG. I didn't kill any units and I lost everything. And I was like, yep, that's good Viper usage. So even Cyclones, which are obviously more of a massing unit, they're still expensive enough that abduct is good on them. So looking through everything, questions popping to mind.
It's the only way to deal with feedback coming in from the right angle and moving overseas. Because when I've heard other people talk about how to deal with SkyToss, they say, oh, you need lurkers or broodlords or something to zone out the lurkers or broodlords to zone out the Templars.
Yeah. I mean, if you get late enough to that stage, like the thing is, so normally if someone's going straight SkyToss, often their Templar are actually very delayed being added into that army, especially if you've seen like Roddy play SkyToss. He will try to do a +3 carrier timing because he doesn't like going to the High Templar stage because it slows the game down massively. So he tries to get in there with like a sharp timing because he knows if he lets it go a bit longer, they're going to get like Vipers and start abducting carriers and blah, blah, blah. So there's windows where it's like, oh, you can just play like against this mech army. You just run in, grab a carrier or two, pull back, easy peasy. But yeah, once the High Templar come out, it's like, yeah, mixture of finding a sneaky angle and using Broodlords to push them back. You can kind of use Lurkers. Lurkers obviously not as mobile. Definitely much better at just destroying a ground army than Broodlords very quickly, Lurkers. But the Broodlords obviously are, yeah, kind of nice. So with that kind of SkyToss situation, let's, guess we can write like a little... First SkyToss. Yeah, it's kind of like Broodlords to cleanse the ground, and then abducts on the carriers, etc. Now, there's also something Banelings can cleanse the ground. So if they don't have enough like Archons and stuff on the ground, if it's like just a few High Templar, rolling 20 Banelings in can actually be amazing, right? 20 Speed Banes to just clear all the High Templar, because they're so mobile and they'll just run in and like, you know, you kind of blitz the ground army. 20 Speed Banes. Some people like to actually, if they don't have Immortals, get a few Ultras is also an option as well. Basically, they tank Interceptors like crazy. Like, they just don't take much damage from them. And similar to the Banelings, they can... Oh, there's no Immortals on the ground. There's like 1 Archon and 6 High Templar. Get 2 Ultras in front on that. That's awesome. So that's like a cool thing. I remember specifically Snoot would go 3 Ultralisks or 2 Ultras. And he would always send it in front specifically to try to bait out Interceptors and chain fungal them. And he'd be like spamming Transfuse on this Ultra and dropping fungals on the Interceptors on top. And I was like, well, this is unnecessarily complicated. Actually, I feel like maybe was it Scarlet who did that? I know Snoot did it as well. Maybe it was one of those who came up with that, and I thought it was hilarious. This was like early Legacy days. But just something to keep in mind. 20 Speedbane's another way of doing that. Yeah, generally though, finding an angle around, like if you're pushing them back, having a forward position of spores is one of the best things you can do there as well, right? So basically, if you have what I call a creep deck, which is my very adult terminology for if you can manage to get creep in between a bunch of their bases, like out on, usually, like, I guess if we take a look, I'm trying to think of a good example of like a map which has like a nice position where maybe like if we think Death Aura, it would be like just on the side of one of their bridges, where basically essentially for them to get from say their 5th base on one side of the map to the 6th base on the other side, they have to actually go back to their natural and down and around to get there without going through your spore crawler. So essentially it's 20 plus spores and a sort of forward static position, kind of very World War I style, that allows you to kind of poke forward with broods, etc., and find angles. So the whole idea there is not only are you creating an area that they can't penetrate and you can fight really well, but you're also you're saying I can attack into many different angles. So suddenly, well, they can't cover all these angles from abducts, right? There's changelings coming forward. Anytime they want to rotate, they've got to go all the way around. So anytime you force your opponent to move from one area to another, abducts become really good. Same thing with mech. Their army's set up, you're like, man, I keep losing my Vipers going into this angle. Always go to a new angle. And even in the movement, even if you just force them to unsiege, you suddenly can go grab a bunch of their units, you know, while they're moving, and you'll get a sick trade. Grab 10 units, 6 units with abduct, kill them, pull back. So anytime you force movement from your opponent, whether with Protoss, SkyToss, or with mech, you will find those abduct angles. But also you've got the forward spores, so that your Broodlor's going to poke forward and just hit a base from there, and then pull back to the spores whenever needed. And you can start to kind of branch out and find those good trades very easily. Whereas if you're no creep spread on the map, stuck on your 5 bases just turtling, it's hard for them to kill you, but it's also hard for you to ever do anything at all. So you just end up kind of stuck, and you finally start moving out to a 6th base and 30 zealots go in your main and kill all your tech. And you're like, oh my God, you know, like it's hard for you to have enough static defense everywhere because they get to pick when and where the fights happen, right? You can't be like, hey, you wasted 60 supply on zealots, I'm going to fight now, because it takes you forever to get across the map. So it gives them the freedom to just do all these big zealot DT counterattacks. They can fly all the carriers into you, kill 2 hatcheries and recall them before you deal with it, you know. it gives them too much freedom. So normally if you can get your forward setup, your siege going, that's where you can make it actually really easy against SkyToss in the mega late game. If you never get that, it's a very slow, grueling one where you're basically just trying to weather the punches and hope that they take inefficient fights on you while you very slowly try to get creep out. Try to take one more base at a time, and you're kind of like a turtle mech player yourself, where you're just hoping they kind of get impatient and don't really know how to play a very slow, patient late game, which does happen sometimes.
All right.
Cool. So I think we've talked quite a bit about Vipers here. There might be more questions, but there's nothing else to do with the micro popping into my head. I mean, we've talked about some of the tactical maneuvers, talked about really focusing on Abduct. Obviously, once you get good enough with it, you can start using Blinding Cloud. Let's just put 1 or 2 notes down on Blinding Cloud for when you start doing it, because this is the most spammed, worst used spell in the entire Zerg arsenal, and it disgusts me every time I see anyone using Blinding Cloud. It's not about the density of units under the cloud. It's about how much surface area your units have. Now, it is a little bit of the first one. What I mean by that, though, is the number of times I see people cover an entire mech army with blinding clouds. You know, so say I'm here, and you come and blinding cloud this. I'll do it. And you're like, so many people go, I've covered everything in blinding cloud, yeah. And then their units are funneling through a choke.
Still in the back.
yeah, and it's like funneling through a choke like this wide or something. You get like 5 Hydras attacking at a time, and it's like Blinding Cloud doesn't last that long, man, unless you actually have enough energy to chain that Blinding Cloud 7 times in a row. Like, it's gonna wear off, and you're gonna have damaged 1 siege tank or killed 1 tank, and then the whole army dies. It's also something where people go, they'll come forward. Like I covered that whole army in 2 Blinding Clouds. Then the other thing that really triggers me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm like, what the fuck did you just do? Why the fuck did we just use 6 Blinding Clouds with 2? People just panic through Blinding Clouds, and I hate it. 1 Viper can literally disable this entire army so easily right now. Have a play with it. Look at the area on that Blinding Cloud. You can see hovering over it highlights the units, and you can be like, oh yeah, I can just throw 2. And don't ever worry about, oh, there's 1 or 2 tanks I missed. Who cares? Just focus on the big clumps, and always save energy for a second round. So Blinding Cloud used to last, I think it was 10 seconds. It now lasts 6 seconds. So it's nowhere near as long lasting as it used to be. Always save energy for a second round. Always focus on being able to actually get in with your units. So Blinding Cloud is about having enough units, coming in, often with a flank or enough surface area. So almost always, I will almost only Blinding Cloud if the opponent is in the most mega clump of all time like this. But even then, preferably only if I'm coming from at least 2 sides, if not 3, right? You know, when they're like forcing their way between my rally points and I've like had so much time to just wait for another round of units. I've set up a 3-sided flank. F2, A move, send the Vipers in, drop 2 Blinding Clouds, wait for it. After about 5 seconds have gone by, drop another 2 just before those 2 wear off. And that's the big thing. So the good thing is, no matter how shit and panicked the scenario is, same scenario there, you abduct 3 units, kill them, pull back. It's always good. It's like it's more of a one-size-fits-all solution once you get good at microing it. That applies to almost any battle. That's why we want to focus on that first. It's a great way to trigger the Terran as well, because they feel like very helpless. They feel really pissed off when their units just keep getting grabbed and killed for free. It really, really tilts them. So, awesome, man. Should we take a look at these replays now and go through those?
Yeah, probably only time for one. The SkyToss one.
Okay, cool.
Just one question.
Yeah.
When I'm in the stage of very slow push with Spellcasters, is it okay to have 80 drones the whole time, or do I need to lose some drones before that once I have the army I want?
That's a good point. I don't think you should be below 66 drones, usually ever, unless it's mega late game. But I guess you could technically go down to like 40. I guess that's a good point. So once you get 3k plus minerals, you can drop your work account. But it kind of depends, right? So sometimes you want a much bigger bank. and to mine a lot more. So sometimes if you want to expand more aggressively, right, you will need way more spines. So sometimes you go like 90 to 95 drones, 5k mineral bank plus, because that accommodates, right? Because as you drop, 30 spine crawlers, bam, back to 2k bank, 65 drones. And I'd say about... Sorry, say again?
You mean around bases to deal with harass?
Yeah, because big zealot run bys are one of the big things. Like you become a very slow immobile player in the late game. Banelings can help a lot, of course. Having a little Ling Bane squad, because Banes are so supply efficient, and having good map control and overlords and things to stop them from getting prisms in is very big, right? But depending on the situation, there's always, of course, some flexibility. I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule there. I made you the party leader, by the way, so let's host up that replay.
I'm getting a message. There was a temporary error.
Oh,
please try again in a few minutes.
On the replay?
Yeah.
That's weird. Let's just reform our party and try again. Shoot. I'm going to show you an invite. Promote to leader. Just give it a go. But yeah, probably 45 drones minimum, I would say, in the super late game. But yeah, it's like once you get a big enough bank, you can afford to definitely drop it down. In general, though, if you're going to the stage where you need tons of static, right, lots of spores, lots of spines, you can kind of overbuild drones. See if you can watch the replay on your own.
I'll reload the game. Oh, I've closed the game. Oh.
All right. I guess I'll do the same thing. Just in case it's me. I will reopen as well. Someone in chat said, what about using a blinding cloud to safely abduct Thors? It's like where you put a blinding cloud where the landing pad is, like right under the Vipers where you're abducting the Thors and tanks to. Sometimes that's worth it, but that's like a TLO move. So what a TLO move is, it's a move that's incredibly cool, and it is efficient in of itself. But in terms of the big picture of APM and are you going to be able to repeat this over and over again, especially if you only have 2 or 3 Vipers, it's actually just not high priority. If you are catching, say you want to abduct 8 siege tanks, you've got a ton of Vipers, makes more sense, right? You can put a blinding cloud down and kind of do that. But, outside of that, you don't want to do that as standard. You're like, I got 3 Vipers and I'm going to use 1/3 of the energy dropping a blinding cloud. Like, just a bit unnecessary. Just taking a single shot from a tank or a few Thors or a few tanks or Thors is not the end of the world. It's still a very efficient fight. I do not see you in the chat channel.
No, game's still loading.
It's still loading? No worries. Can you abduct a unit in the middle of a Protoss recall, and does it cancel the recall? I don't think the recall would cancel. I think you can abduct it. But if it survives the however many seconds for the recall to complete, it'll recall. I'm checking to see if there's anything else, because these sort of micro techniques are so specific. Definitely shift moving back can be nice. That is what we were doing.
Same, yeah. There was a temporary error with your request. Please try again. How do you screen share on Discord?
So if you just click that
turn on screen share.
Yeah, give that one a go.
2.
So I mean, this one's not going to be ideal for the stream, but that's okay as long as we can just take a glance through.
Can you see?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks good, man. All right. So basically you failed to break him with your push, you said, right? And kind of things went on. Was this straight SkyToss or SkyToss just later in the game?
Straight SkyToss. And he rushed Storm as well.
And you tried to break him with what, a Hydra push or?
I tried a corrupt Ling timing, but he rushed Storm. So then I did a Broodlord push, which killed a base, but the army was still getting better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm very good at throwing ZvSkytoss. So you've just got into replay, right? I see black screen. Oh no.
Loading the replay.
Okay. It just went black for a little bit there. No worries. I can see now.
Oh, okay.
It's all fine.
So my vision.
Yeah. So let's let's 8 times
eight.
speed it and go from there. Now for the chat, I'm not even going to bother. Well, I guess we don't mind if chat sees this. It should be not the end of the world. There we go. So chat's going to get to see just a little bit. Not the greatest view, but we'll do what we do. Okay, so your opponent's going fast forwards here. So upon noticing that, was there any adjustment?
Yeah, more drones. No plans to do any.
Cool. Can we go off your camera? Just because that's real dizzying. Just go to everyone's camera. Yeah. 4 times speed is fine for now, though. And did you know it was a Void Ray yet? Or
Yes.
okay. So once you see a Void Ray, I guess you know you're up against someone who's a bit of a weirdo. I think it killed a guy, right?
Killed an overlord, yeah. So, yeah, I did know.
Okay, cool.
Everyone, time for
So your job here really should be to just drone straight to like 70, 80 drones really fast, right? Because you know this guy's got a Forge and a Void Ray. You know 100% this is a SkyToss player who can't move out and do anything to you. So it looks like you're going fast double upgrades. I do think you could have droned even a little bit harder than you did, but overall pretty friggin' good. Could have a few more lings out for map control just to see if anything's coming.
80 drones when he had 55. 80 drones when he had 55.
Yeah.
The double upgrades are because I assumed he was rushing carriers.
So you just wanted to play Ling Bane, crash through the ground into corrupt
the ling. Corrupt the ling.
So if you've got this much of a head start, I would actually heavily advise you focus on just Speedbanes and Zerglings and just wipe out his entire economy before building a single anti-air unit. So I think there's just no purpose to build anti-air here because we just don't need it. So when everyone plays SkyToss like this, they can't defend their economy. If you've got such early warning of it, you could just go Speedbanes for knocking down the natural wall and run Speedbane Ling into the third, the natural, if you can drop Banes in the main as well. And go up to Ultras and 3-3 as well. And basically just go 100 drone and just roll Ling Bane at him. And yeah, and only build Corruptors if he actually comes across the map to attack you. So that's my favorite way of dealing with it if you get a really early read, because it just makes your life so easy. Whereas if you think about it, Corruptors are this kind of specialist unit that sucks versus Void Ray, sucks versus Storm, sucks versus Cannons. They're just there for killing the carriers. Now in this scenario, he hasn't rushed carriers. If he was rushing carriers, I think the Corruptors would work out. But the thing is that they're not flexible. Whereas Lingbane beats carriers simply by the fact that the carriers can't defend the workers. So, he's building a fucking Tempest, this Gronk. Absolute Gronk. It's the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Yeah. So your game would be so much simpler if you actually focus on... What's your drone count here? I think you didn't get it high enough, funnily enough. Yeah. I know that sounds so dumb, but you also built spines everywhere, so you don't need spines everywhere.
I just saw the Dark Shrine. So one spine each base. That's not terrible, is it?
Oh, so you did have a... Okay, so it was a DT shrine? Okay, fair enough. That's fine. I did not realize there was a DT shrine. That's cool. But yeah, sorry, let me get our document open on my other PC so I can write some notes because I've got this up on our Discord call monitor. So let me just write this here. Okay, so this was the SkyToss replay 2. Okay, so if we spotted early enough, I think your initial response, I think, was great, but AA even later in the game, don't even think about Hydralisks. You're not allowed to even have a Hydra Den. Don't even think about Hydralisks. Just Speedbanes and 2-2, then 3-3 Adrenal and Ultras as fast as possible. 100 drones, crash into their economy in multiple flanks repeatedly. And there's just no way they can defend that. So even clumped up cannons and batteries, Banelings will take it out. You've got such a big economy. You have a great time. If they push with carriers, you can get around it. You know, you can get Corruptors and spores. But you can see here the problem with if you go mass corruptor, right? Where it's like, oh, they just can't fight against anything except the air units, and even peeing on buildings is like very situational. So it leads to a big problem with corruptors where you end up with what ends up being dead supply. It's very hard to trade off if they've got something like storm or cannons underneath, whereas Lingbane can always find a way in. So yeah, drops in the main can be really helpful for getting in, but honestly, you know, just 20 Banes shift clicked on natural wall and into main and natural mineral line. 20 Banes clicked into third mineral line.
And even here, where he rushed Storm, the Templars can't be everywhere.
Well, they can't be everywhere. All he's got is High Templar. So if you ran, so go back to like 8 minutes and look at what he's got. Because you're running Zerglings in as well. It's not just Speed Banes. So if you look at what he's got, like you literally run 20, 30 Lings, get on those High Templar, they have to storm themselves. Like he loses those High Templar just to the Zerglings. Like running with 30, 40 Zerglings. Obviously shield battery will be annoying, especially with overcharge, but as long as your Banes aren't just rolling in like, oh, here's 30 Banes at your third, here's 30 Banes at your natural in a giant clump for you to storm, you'll always find a way into those bases. And you got to remember, he actually probably can't get enough High Templar up to defend the next wave, even if he keeps all his probes alive after the first. Whereas you have an insane economy. So you can just keep doing it all day.
The Storm exactly kills the High Templar. Didn't know that.
If the whole thing hits them, yeah. Well, what they can do, though, is they can storm themselves, all morph into Archons and say, F you, we survived. But either way, you got rid of the High Templar. So yeah, that's actually incredibly powerful. It's the easiest way to deal with SkyToss. You'll really enjoy it. You'll laugh your ass off when you do it. It's the funnest thing in the world. Definitely don't be going, too many different things. If you do play this style, so let's map this style out so you know. So what is the late game? If we don't do enough damage to the Lingbane and we have to go to the next stage or whatever, right? They weather the storm, they survive with 50 probes, and they manage to eventually get a fourth, and they're slowly building, and they're getting that air army. So what are we doing? So what is the next step? I would say double Spire upgrades is rather important, right? I think that's really good for Corruptor Broodlord. I think the Creep Dick is one of the most important things. So in this case, it would be up to the right. If you scroll up to like probably that low ground area, it's probably just down in the, up to the left of there. Because you want to be in between. Yeah, in the valley right there. Yeah, that's it. So in that valley, if you can just get like 20...
down here.
Yeah, if you get like 20 spores there, because if you think about it, then you can like siege this base on the right, but you can also pull back and then just go up. So his army's off to the right trying to defend there, and then suddenly you just push north from there with your Broodlords, fly over the gap, so you can scroll up to the left. Because imagine, you can branch up there, and you can hit that base really easily if his army's down to the right. And each time he's like, if you scroll down to the bottom, you see he's got this little clump of batteries and cannons, they'd be gone. You'd pick those off straight away. Anytime he goes around, he's in danger of getting caught by abducts, right? If he's got to rotate between his third and his fourth, running through this middle area, you've always got changelings there or creep or whatever. And you just, oh yeah, I'll grab 3 carriers. Yes, please. I'll grab a few tempests with abduct. And that becomes super duper powerful. Yeah, so this timing you're doing here, it's never going to work, right? Because it's a lot of Broodlords that are doing damage and they will kill some stuff, but the problem is there's no way to beat that ground army, right? Our Corruptors are going to eat big storms when they do it, when they run over the Tempests and stuff. So even if you kill a lot of the Tempests, it's like there's Storm, there could be Archons, there's Void Rays. But if you have spores underneath, you got some Vipers here, you can pull back and rotate between bases, and then what does he do? He's got to run through Spore Crawlers to get at your Broods. But anytime we're presented like this, you know, he's not really focus firing very well with the Tempests. You can tell he's kind of got his whole army, what looks like on one control group, as far as we can tell. Whereas if he was focus firing the Broods, he'd be doing a bit better there. But, yeah, cool. So, Creep Dick with Spores forward. I'm a big fan of Infestors for fungal against Mass Carrier, but I think Vipers are actually the easier unit to use. Infested Terrans aren't around anymore. So I think Vipers take priority, and verse Mass Carrier, adding, you know, some Infestors for chain fungal on Interceptors can be huge, because if they get like 10 carriers up, even with 20-30 spores, they can cleanse them pretty quickly. But if you suddenly drop a few fungals in a row and you catch like 40, 50 interceptors and just knock them out of the sky, they kind of have to back off, right? So the infestors make it much harder for them to just smash their way through the spore crawlers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And you just Broodlords kind of poke forward and pick stuff off. You just keep rotating those attack angles. But yeah, I think you'd find a lot of success here. Because like all this poking you were doing, just imagine you're pulling back a little bit further between it, grabbing a few Tempests, you're sending Changelings in constantly. If you've got supply free, we roll, we've got them pinned at the 4th base, and then we roll 30 Banes into another base, or a bunch of Speedling Adrenal Glands run in the top and kill a new 5th base he's trying to secure, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think this sort of game, you had such a good start. Focus on not even countering the air units, but just killing everything on the ground instead. You're going to have a really good time with it. It's amazing for dealing with SkyToss. And that's same if they're massing carriers immediately. Same if they're going fast storm like this. Doesn't matter. Any form of SkyToss. You get to read this quickly, that your opponent can't do anything aggressive because he's going a Forge and Void Rays. You get to go 80 drones and 1-1 as quickly as you did in this game. You've got this one in the bag.
Okay.
Cool.
If it does get to this stage, then what is the comp I'm going for? How many Broodlords? How many Vipers?
Oh yeah. That's an interesting one. I think it depends on their army. So what do we say? A minimum of, let's say, 7 Broodlords and a maximum of, if they're mostly ground with just a few Tempests or just a few air units, but there's actually like a big ground army, we probably could go to a maximum of 20 Broodlords. That's very extreme, of course. Yeah, I remember I died to Scarlet's ground army once when she was playing Protoss, and at the end I was like, I had 14 Broodlords. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, am I actually meant to build more than 14? She was like, yeah, sometimes. I mean, she's like, if the Protoss is just crazy enough to be max on ground against heavy Broodlord, like, yeah, go 20. And I was like, okay. I was like, I guess that does make sense. I just was so used to thinking of Broodlords as the air dominant unit against a ground army. Yeah, so 7 to 20 Broodlords. How many Vipers? Probably 4 Vipers, I think, is a good count. What do you think?
That doesn't sound like very many. If they feed back, they could easily feed back all of those.
They could. They don't. I mean, any unit you abduct is massive though, as well, right? I mean, you could go up to 6, but I wouldn't go higher than 6 because how often? I mean, there's no use to abducting that many units at once, right? Because if you abduct like 6 carriers or something, it's like, eh. So the whole point is you shouldn't really be getting abducted ever anyway. I mean, it'll happen, but having more Vipers, it's like, I guess you can fight feedback by just having enough Vipers that they can't feedback them all. But usually I'm more on the side of like finding the correct angle, using those changelings and picking off units. And, often I'll even only just have 2 Vipers with those corruptors. But it does come down. I've written 4 to 6 here. What do you think? Would you go as high as like 8 or something?
No 6 then.
Okay, let's say 3 to 6 because it does depend on the scenario. And how many corruptors? I don't know, dude.
Just
20?
the resting corruptors, isn't it?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, all you really need is enough to one-shot the units when you abduct them. So I kind of feel like, so the funny thing is when you have your spores there, right? I don't even care about corruptors. I would rather have like more spores. Like I'm happy to sit at 180 supply. People are like, why don't you build 10 more corruptors? Because if they try to push through my spores, well, often I'm kind of just chilling with my corruptors until the High Templar are dead. I don't really want to be running in with my corruptors and getting them all stormed to death and blasted by Archons. So normally corruptors are terrible at fighting interceptors, but I'll actually keep them kind of behind the spores and just use them to help gun down the interceptors. Because that's the way spores fight against carriers, is you just kill the interceptors, right? You're not shooting the carriers. They're too far back. They're out of range. If you land abducts, though, of course, the corruptors come in big. If the storm is gone on the ground, the corruptors can just fly in and focus fire things, right? That's where they excel. But I very rarely find myself in a situation where I want more than 20. So I think something we can also say here is, well, what if you just have a big squad of ground units for run-bys and run-by defense. That's also something that we can definitely have, but it does weaken your army, right? And it's just something where I think you've got to find your own rules for balancing this. A lot of people, it's like, okay, cool, set up the forward position. It's actually that big squad of ground units that's important. Or you're playing someone who just keeps running in these big zealot counterattacks and backstabs. You might have a shit ton of like Ling Bane just on a squad defending these zealot DT run-bys constantly, right? Because he's investing in it, you got to invest in more defense. You're like, spines can't cut it, man. It's 23-3 zealots. Like, you know, unless I've got 15 spines all together in a clump, which I can't have at every base, I need this roaming squad of units. Or, hey, he keeps trying to expand to too many bases, and I need this more mobile squad to deny them. And these cracklings, you know, when they get in the mineral line, they kill everything really quickly. So I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I guess in terms of infestors, like, what do we want to do? Add some infestors? What do we, I don't know, 4 to 8 infestors for chain fungal interceptors? Arguably, you can keep some units in reserve. So if you go, you know, bring a few infestors or a few vipers forward, some people will specifically leave some vipers and infestors not control grouped in case they F up and get all their spellcasters feedbacked or killed, and then they can kind of rotate them out. They're like, you guys go get energy, take you off my control group, add other vipers into control group. That shit's very complicated. I would not advise it, but some people find they get a good rhythm around that stuff. So we'll kind of see what works for you as a player. Yeah, I think this is all very, very late game stuff. I don't get to experience this too much these days, since Protoss players are mostly massing Stalkers, which is kind of the roach of Protoss. But yeah, I think these are most of the details. What are you thinking? And we're going to finish up, by the way. We are out of time. So any last questions or thoughts on that one?
And Corruptors, not Hydras.
Never Hydras, yeah.
Never Hydras.
If you were already going Hydras and you had to clump out, like, you know, yeah, sometimes I'll try to do a Hydra timing or play really quick Vipers with Hydra Lurker against SkyToss, and I'll try to do that style, but I feel a lot of pressure to get over there and start abducting those units before they get too high, because Hydras basically almost always have to fight by trying to deal with the interceptors, which is just generally tough, just because they're shorter range. They're not flying units like Corruptors that can just get on top. And they're so vulnerable to Psystorm and Colossus and stuff that, you know, Hydras are very playable for a long time until the one fight where, like, storms land on them or something, or there's just, like, 10 carriers and there's just more interceptors, blots out the sun, you know? And that's where the Hydras fall off really hard. So I find, you know, if you already know that it's this, there's just no reason to go into Hydras. You've got more specialist, better units that do the job. Okay. Hydras seem tempting for dealing because they shoot up and down. But if you've ever seen 10 Hydras against 10 charge lots, like, you know, out in the open dealing with a backstab or something, you're like, oh, I killed a Zealot and I lost 10 Hydras. Fuck. So they're a bit too fragile.
Okay. Should I have a game plan such as always try to deny the 5th base, or should I just let the game go however long it goes if I'm going for this late game?
I think you can just let it go. I mean, it's more if you can just get that forward position where you can get them in an uncomfortable spot and take good trades, like, you will eventually win. I wouldn't be too obsessed about stopping them getting a 5th. It's more going to be about who can take efficient fights. You know, I've beat many Protoss players who are up 2 bases on me the whole game, because they are mid-game experts and they just they don't know how to use Revelation well enough. They don't know how to have their High Templar guarding the correct angles, so they keep getting carriers and motherships abducted. They keep throwing massive Zealot attacks in, and it turns out once you've already done that 16 times in a row, the Zerg is kind of prepared. So they start just throwing away 2,000-3,000 minerals of Zealots at a time, and they just keep doing it, and they kind of impale themselves on me. You know, I had a game on Golden Wall, and I was behind for a long time, and I just played Viper, Lurker, Hydra, which normally I go, well, I shouldn't be able to win if I'm playing a really good late game Protoss. And I remember at the end of this game, I was like 23,000 resources lost more efficient than this Protoss, and I was like, oh my god, I've never I'm like, I know that shouldn't happen, but the fact that this was like an almost 6k Protoss who just was an expert at not that stage of the game, right? You absolutely can just win through efficiency. So once you get to that stage, and like I said, especially if you don't have the creep dick forward outside their bases, you do need to just kind of, focus on all that matters is efficient fights. Part of those efficient fights is, if you can, dictate the pace with that forward creep deck or anything like that, or some way of, picking away and forcing them into bad engagements. There's a lot of the vision battle, so you can see where their army is, and you can always choose the correct angle, come in, grab 2 carriers and a mothership, kill them, pull back. And it's just, often death by 1,000 cuts. The player who's more comfortable just chilling, making sure they don't take damage, paper cutting their opponent with some abducts, going back, looking for it again, rinse and repeat. And it's, it's a bit like sanding your opponent down, paper cut death, whatever metaphor we want to use. But I wouldn't be too worried about, I've got to deny a base or anything, because you are playing endgame. That's what this style is. The moment you're thinking about endgame, all that matters is how efficient your engagements are going to be over the course.
Okay.
Awesome sauce, man. The Vipers versus Mech, Roach Hydra Viper swap, once you realize what's happening. Try to make sure you're a bit more quick at sending an Overseer through, or Zerglings or something, to kind of get wind of what's going on. And just try to work on those abducts, and I think it should work pretty well. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully you don't end up in that super end game scenario versus Protoss too much, though, as well. Like I said, hopefully the Lingbane just kills any of these SkyToss douchebags before they get there. And should be good, man.
Okay.
All right. I'll catch you later, man. Have a good night.
Right.
Good night, man. All right. A little bit inconsistent mic volume from him that time. It was mostly good, and then it would just randomly fade, but that's the way it goes. Good session and lots of details. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you for watching. Appreciate those of you supporting the Patreon and whatnot. We've been putting up a good number of coaching sessions. Not all of them. There's just too many. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. We'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye and good night.